My name is Sarah Owens. I'm one of the artists in residence with Ideas Louisville, facilitated by their Art Place America grant. So I'm really excited to be here tonight and share with you my career in biophilia, which has brought me back to Louisville after basically a 12-year hiatus from this wonderful city. So before you recoil from the term biophilia, I know it kind of sounds like a communicable disease. It's not. It's actually a term that was first coined by E.O. Wilson, who is one of my personal heroes. He's a research biologist, a scientist, and overall just amazing naturalist who first wrote about biophilia in his book that was published in the 1980s. And I came across the term and sort of had an aha moment when people started asking me a couple of years ago, why is it that you do what you do? And, you know, a lot of people have known me as a creative person. A lot of people have known me as a gardener or as a baker. But now sort of the way I'm working creatively, all of those things are starting to come together. And so I started sort of looking at, you know, what drives my creative process, and I came upon this term, biophilia, which really just basically describes the innate need that we as human beings crave and desire to connect with other natural living processes and systems. And when I read about this, I said, you know what, that's it. That's exactly it. I have this sort of subconscious need to really live and work and create in tune with the natural rhythms of our environment. So tonight, we're going to take you through that theme as it applies to all of the different things that I do, including my work as a ceramic artist here in Louisville, as well as my role as Rosarian at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, owner of BK17 Bakery, which is a micro bakery I started in Brooklyn and now bringing here, and how all of those things sort of have culminated in my work as an author on my first book that'll be published November 3rd of this year and will be available for pre-order very soon. So many of you know me, or maybe you don't, but basically I started my creative career here in Louisville as a ceramic sculptor. I graduated from Bellarmine University in 2001, and really for the next few years spent time kind of indulging in the process of looking at patterns, textures, forms that occur in nature through several different residencies, one of which was at Bernheim Forest near Bardstown, Kentucky, where I spent a lot of time just kind of walking through the fields and roaming the woods and geeking out about seed pods and then making them into creative sculptural things. Continued that investigation through a residency at Louisville Stoneware, where I worked with some of their processes to further expand my work, and then moved back to Tennessee, where I'm originally from, and built a studio there. And that's where I really started kind of pushing my work a little bit and exposing myself to a broader audience beyond the Southeast, and started traveling up to the Northeast, and realized about that time that I had kind of pigeonholed myself into a creative style, which as an artist that's trying to make a living off of what they do, that's usually a good thing. People recognize you, they want to buy your work, that sort of thing. But what I realized is that I really had a very specific skill set, and I wanted to expand that. That's also a very gentle way of saying I wanted a more reliable income. So I started thinking about different ways that I could do that without sacrificing my passion for the natural world. So in 2007, I decided to kind of switch gears professionally and enter the world of horticulture. So I moved to Brooklyn, New York, and began a 2-year program at the New York Botanical Gardens School of Professional Horticulture. During that time, I tried to figure out different ways to sort of shift my lifestyle professionally, but still maintain this kind of natural rhythm with the environment. And so I spent time at the New York Botanical Gardens, working there, attending classes there. But I also started working in other gardens throughout the city and gaining a lot of experience, just sort of studying different ways to use horticulture as a way to bridge the gap between a very urban lifestyle and this sort of need that we have to connect with nature. So I was very fortunate during that time to actually be hired into the position of Rosarian at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden before I graduated. And this is kind of not something that typically happens, and I was very, very fortunate to gain this position. And spent the next 6 years just sort of facilitating this riot of blooms at the Botanical Garden. And about that same time, I really, I kind of dove into this job with the need to solve problems that the Botanical Garden was having, maintaining this very historic collection. But it was also just, again, time for me to really indulge in studying nature and the natural forms that sort of inspire me creatively. So I was really living this kind of amazing life as a gardener and living in, what people consider the center of the cultural universe. It was all wonderful, but I also went through a personal health crisis during that time, and that's kind of a talk in and of its own, but it led me to begin learning about and using fermentation as a technique to make my food more digestible and nutritionally available. And what happened was basically I became an avid and obsessed bread baker. And I really started using sourdough as a natural leavening process. And as a result, I got this product, this beautiful bread that not only was digestible, but really filled this need that I had to have my hands in a malleable, sculptable thing called dough. And so, it was this sort of like, oh, wow, this is great. And I can do it right here in my kitchen, and I don't have to pay like thousands of dollars for a studio in Brooklyn. And so it kind of, this sort of snowballed. And I also, had this full circle moment where I realized that everything I was doing, the gardening, the sculpting, the baking, all of it had a direct response to nature, whether it was the weather, how humid it was outside, whether it was hot, whether it was cold. Clay has a response, dough has a response, obviously gardening has a response. And so that's when all of this kind of started coming full circle for me personally, but also professionally. And people who were eating my bread started, requesting to have the loaves, and so I developed this small business baking bread and selling to the New York community. And what really happened personally for me is I had a way to support my hobby of making beautiful things that were also edible. And so what was really fun for me about that was really, again, looking at these beautiful natural processes and forms and textures and translating them directly into the surfaces of the things that I was creating, and really sort of bridging that gap and that need to reiterate nature in creative form. So while that was happening, and as I was sort of honing my craft as a baker, I became more skillful at expressing the different processes of nature. And what I love about this slide actually is you'll see on the left, there's this peony that's kind of, this is at the beginning of spring and it's just sort of starting to open up. And what I realized I could do with bread is take the techniques that you have to, there's certain skills that you have to perfect in order to bake a loaf of bread. For example, one of the things is you have to score the bread in order for it to open up in the oven and expand and become the beautiful loaf that we're able to eat. But I discovered that I could do that in a way that mimicked the way flowers open and sort of progress. And so this was kind of like my way of just sort of playing around and again, bringing the creative process back through inspiration, through nature. So what happened during this time was I started getting a little more media coverage in Brooklyn and Manhattan, where I was supplying bread. And I was approached with the opportunity to write a book, and specifically a cookbook. And what's been really exciting since that's happened is that I've been able to bring everything into this project of writing the cookbook. There's the botanical elements, there's the inspiration from nature, there's the health aspect where, I talk about the digestibility and the lactic acid fermentation and all the really geeky aspects of baking with sourdough. And so it's really been one of the most creative things I think I've ever done. And I just had this excuse to kind of like go into my kitchen and not only start using sourdough and fermentation techniques to bake bread, but to do other things as well, like wonderful cakes that are not only beautiful and tasty and seem kind of indulgent, but are actually healthy as well. And then naturally what also happened as I was developing the book and styling the book, the botanical elements literally started creeping into the whole picture. And so this is not an image from the book, but this is an example of, everything I was touching in the field was basically making its way into my kitchen and eventually into my mouth, and then eventually into the mouths of other people. So it was kind of this, again, the full circle. So I kind of sped through this, but basically, what all this means is, and why it applies to what I'm doing here, is through the Ideas residency, I've been able to return to Louisville and work on incorporating all of these elements, the gardening, the baking, the sculptural elements, the geeking out about plants, into one sort of umbrella of Sarah Owens as creative artist, which basically means that I'm here focusing on trying to develop myself as a creative branding element so that I can continue to be able to do all of these things here in Louisville. I can continue to bake, I can continue to garden. I've started a new business, farming flowers organically. And I can continue to write about what I'm doing. And the really exciting thing is that I can do all that in a city that really supports the creative arts and supports the lifestyle that I want as a creative, which is a slower lifestyle where I can sit around and drink lemonade on my front porch, or I can have a dinner party and share some bread. Speaking of, I brought a couple of loaves tonight. Please help yourself. I'll slice up some more. It does have nuts. If anyone has a nut allergy, be aware. And otherwise, thanks for listening to me kind of ramble on. Does anybody have questions? I know I didn't really talk specifically about what I'm doing here in Louisville. So what am I doing here in Louisville? That's the question. What the hell am I doing here? I ask myself that every day. No, what I'm doing here in Louisville is I'm basically bringing everything that I've been doing. So the micro bakery, the gardening, I'm bringing that here and developing that into a new business. So I have a couple of acres here in Louisville that I'm farming flowers on organically for the cut flower industry. And there will be other aspects of that business as well, like I'll be able to provide a subscription service for cut flowers on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. I'll also be baking bread in a similar way, so you'll be able to subscribe, get your loaf once a week, or pick it up at the farmer's market. Eventually, what I'm hoping is that will also develop into more of a wholesale business as well. And I'm looking to work with a couple of organizations like Youth Build to really develop the skill set necessary to allow those businesses to grow. And then I'll continue writing. The sourdough book comes out this November, but I'm looking to do another project that will focus on sort of Southern life as it applies to scratch cooking and what I call abundant living from the land. So, I'll continue to basically be doing what I've been doing, but just in a little different application, a little different scale.
But in your baking, are you noticing any geographic distinctions that you wouldn't attribute necessarily to ingredients, but weather? Or
You mean
or do you anticipate any of that?
like how they influence the actual process of making bread?
Yeah, being in the Ohio Valley, for example.
I do actually. The ingredients are actually a very important part of that. The way I approach bread and trying to make it into a more digestible, nutritious product is to use flour that is locally grown and as freshly milled as possible in order to maintain the integrity of the ingredients, which then transfers to the eventual loaf of bread. What that means is, here I haven't quite found that channel. I haven't found the miller. I haven't found the farmer yet. So in order for me to do that, I really have to start participating in a broader network of kind of a grassroots movement toward that. I think it's here in the South. There's a lot of people around us doing that, that are milling, grains that go directly. They're milled one day, they go into a batch of dough the next day. But it's not here in Louisville yet, which it may just mean that I need to start milling my own flour, on a very small batch level.
Growing your own flour?
I don't. It's not. It's not something that I think is appropriate for me to do on the scale that would need to be done. I mean, that's very much a farming operation. I'm more of a specialty grower in terms of ornamentals. That's kind of where my expertise lies. So I can work with farmers, and I've started conversations with particular farmers in this area about doing that. I just have to give them a market, because otherwise they're really devoting a lot of their land to something that they're not sure they're going to get a return, an economic return on. So I have to, give them a reason. Mm-hmm.
What are your summer cut flowers species-wise?
Summer cut flowers? Well, I have a long wish list, but obviously, I specialize in heirloom roses, so that's going to be in there. It's going to work itself in there. But there will be the classic cut flowers that, are in demand, like lisianthus and zinnias and that sort of thing. But because I have this botanical garden background, I want to grow the more unusual things, as well as, woody shrubs and perennials, and not just, a lot of cut flowers are usually annuals. So I kind of want to broaden that a little bit, and off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank, but I can share with you the long list, the long wish list, and a lot of fall blooming things as well. And I hope to kind of shift the focus. Like with roses, a lot of times people value them only for their bloom, and because I know that species so well and the cultivars so well, I know that they have beautiful foliage and they have amazing hips, and the canes can be quite gorgeous as well. So I want to be able to grow them in a way that florists can use them not only for their blooms but for other reasons as well. What originally I was thinking that I would do with this residency is build a really large scale bread business, and whereas I still will continue to bake bread, what I'm doing right now is kind of shifting the focus to horticulture. Youth Build has a horticultural skills track, and so they're already working with youth to give them those types of skills. And so what I'm hoping the conversation will evolve to is placing some of them with me as my business builds and as I can pay them for their work and labor, to have them work with me. I'm very much used to, especially in the botanical garden atmosphere, working with interns. I worked with 9 interns every year, and sort of rotated them through and taught them different skills and helped them literally grow as professionals from all different backgrounds. And I love that interaction, and I need that interaction. And so what I'm hoping is with the cut flower farming business, that it will grow to a point where I'll need to start pulling in those people, and maybe not necessarily keeping them with me for years and years and years, but again, sort of boosting them up a level so that they can then leave my operation and enter into the field of horticulture with a whole new set of not just horticultural skills, but just professional skills in general, which is kind of what Youth Build is all about doing.